Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Med School Minutes podcast, where we discuss what it takes to attend and successfully complete a medical program. This show is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. Here is your host, Kaushik Gua.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on another episode of Med School Minutes, where we talk about everything MD with a focus on international students, specifically Caribbean students. Today's episode is actually a follow-up from our last episode where we talked to Dr. Ramirez, our provost, about student success and student motivation. Today, we actually have two not too long ago former students and who were in the hot seat, practically a couple of months ago, and they are going through the residency process this year. So they can tell us firsthand what they feel, what they felt, and what they think are things that helped them along. So without further ado, let's welcome our student counselors, Dr. Saad Hannan and Dr. Georgy Kehedy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. So without further ado, why don't we just do a quick introduction of yourself, where you did your undergrad, then, your time in St. James, which campus did you go to? And then post St. James, some experience that you gained in counseling. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Kehedy?
Okay, I am Dr. Saad Kehedy. I attended St. James School of Medicine. I went to the campus of St. Vincent, nice island. My undergrad, I did it in Denison University in Ohio.
It's a big party school, by the way.
No, it's a very good liberal arts school. Yeah, and it was a good experience in St. James. You get a lot of support from the school and also throughout with the exam and everything. Yeah, so I'm happy to be able to contribute now that I just graduated. I'm happy to give back to the school and other students still in the school right now.
Okay. Awesome. How about you, Dr. Hannan?
So I'm originally from Canada. I did my undergrad in St. Catharines at Brock University. It's the real party school. Once I finished my undergrad there, I did my MD at St. James on St. Vincent. And then once I finished and completed that, in between I was working a little in Canada in one of the clinics with the doctor. And then a couple of months maybe later, I took up this position as a counselor. One of the main reasons was this position brings a lot of benefits, not only to me as a a graduate, but also because I think it was the perfect opportunity for me to do something, make a change within the system, within the school.
Okay.
Some things that I found that I wanted to change, and that's why I figured this would be the best way to address that. Okay. So
Dr. Hannan, are you saying we're not perfect? Come on.
I wish. Listen. If everybody was perfect, then the world would be a very boring place. I think it's best to know that not everyone is perfect, and including myself. Right. I made mistakes.
He can speak for himself.
I made a mistake agreeing to do this. So the point is, not everybody's perfect, but the good thing is that St. James and the faculty is very open to improving, and I think that is a fantastic perspective to have and mindset to have. So that's the best part.
So going back to both of you again and your experience as a student, both of you literally graduated, not literally, you guys actually graduated less than a year ago.
Right.
Just after last March, just after the match. And then you guys are up for the match this year.
Right.
So obviously, compared to any other person that we've interviewed before, you guys have the freshest experience of dealing with St. James, both from an administration side as well as from the student side. And you have the good fortune of actually dealing with students, because that's your job as counselors. You're talking to students all the way from MD1 through MD5, if I'm not mistaken.
And after.
Oh, and after too. Yeah. So if they have issues, you're helping them out, and you're essentially a sounding board. So that is honestly a wealth of experience from being a student. Now, from your experiences as a counselor, what do you think are the biggest challenges that medical students generally face? I want to start with you, Dr.
Ooh, that's a good question. So I would say, challenges change with time. And by that, I mean more realistically. And, on the island, you have different challenges, right? And then coming back and studying, you have different challenges. I think speaking about the island, one of the biggest things a lot of students often, the biggest challenge that they have to face is the fact that they have to self-discipline, because they're no longer living, let's say, with family, with parents. Many of them, this is their first time being away from home.
Okay.
They can be homesickness. So a lot of the challenges are personal challenges. They have to be able to become independent. That could be a very big shock for a lot of folks. So that, I think, is a very massive challenge. Another challenge is that, even though it's an island, there aren't many things that would distract you, but the beaches and the view, the life and experience of the island can sometimes be distractions. And so you have to kind of fine tune that, enjoy the island and the living experience of being on an island, while also balancing the active studying for your block exams that happen every month. So I think that comes to organizing and, again, self-discipline. Nobody else is there to tell you. You got to be able to do it yourself. You're living on your own. So those are the challenges I believe you face specifically to the island. When it comes to, let's say, prepping for your exams, especially for your board exams, CBSE, the Step 1 exam, the biggest challenges students often face are time management. Many students don't know how to organize their time, organize the responsibilities of a day to day, actually, when it comes to being on their own, being in an independent self-study situation. Many of them, would sometimes overcompensate by working hard one day and then the following day take a full day or half a day off. I think balance is definitely necessary, but understanding your, schedule and deadlines for yourself, I think it's more important. And to do that, you have to be organized. So time management, I think, is one of the biggest problems any and every student can face, especially medical students. You don't know how fast or how quickly 1 month can just run out while you're prepping for a board exam. So if anybody wants to start from fixing their main issue, would be, how can I manage and task out my major goal in week by week basis? That way it's step by step, it's organized, you know what you have to complete each week. And so that way you could, by the end of the month, you've already completed all the tasks, and maybe you completed a 50% of your overall goal. So,
what about you, Dr. Kehedy?
I like what my colleague mentioned about dividing between the island and after the island. But I think for me, what I would say the biggest challenge is the student himself, yourself. Because going to medical school is a challenging experience in itself. So you're going to be pushed to your limit. And for me, when I say your biggest challenge yourself is how much are you willing how far are you willing to go, how much sacrifice are you willing to do, and that involves self-discipline. You have to learn to be self-disciplined. You have to learn self-discipline. There's also the aspect about humility, because if you're not humble, this journey will humble you. Okay. And if you are hard-headed, it will crush you. So it's good to learn some of those, accept that, you may need to readjust yourself. You don't necessarily know everything. Maybe you were the top student in undergrad, but once you start to medical school, you need to realize that you may not be the top. And even if you're the top, you still have to learn, because it's not an easy trajectory.
Right.
And so you need to do a lot of self-discipline, a lot of stay on task, and also be open to advice from other people.
Right.
Yeah. And another big challenge also come now from your relative, your close one, because sometimes they don't understand what you're going through.
Right.
so they may say things to you, or they may look at you a certain way because they are like expecting you to do maybe it should be done by now or things like that. So that can be another challenge, and that's something I hear a lot from students. Like my family doesn't understand what is going through. So that's a challenge worth mentioning.
I mean, that's very interesting because I know when we're just coming out of the pandemic, as you all know, there were several semesters that were done from home. And a lot of students is like, oh, I'm going to study from home and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. However, with very, very, very minimal exceptions, I would say it's practically pretty blanket to say. I can make a blanket statement that people who studied from home just didn't do as well.
Right.
And what you pointed out, Dr. Kehedy, probably makes a lot of sense because if you're in an environment, in school, if nothing else, you're surrounded by people who are struggling the exact same way.
Exactly.
Whereas at home, it is unrealistic to expect your mom, dad, or husband or wife who's not a physician really understanding what you're going through.
Exactly. And I think that if I could, I would change mine to that. I think it's a very big challenge a lot of students have to overcome because parents or family members or loved ones don't quite understand the medical journey.
Right.
Sometimes they'll try to support you, but they don't know how.
Right. Exactly.
And I think at the end of the day, they think that supporting you, it's being funding your education, which is
support.
Which is definitely support. But at the end of the day, some of these students need guidance from fellow, I put it out there, but mental health kind of help assistance.
Right. And it's not even that. I've heard students talk about things that, there's this series of, chemicals that we need to memorize, and someone came up with a cool mnemonic that they're just exchanging and sharing while they're drinking beer. That's something that you're just not going to get.
You can't do that with your parent. I mean, you could.
But if your parents aren't physicians, they're coming up with pretty random mnemonics. That's
exactly.
That's true. That's true.
But to your point again, Dr. Hannan, in our last group of counselors, there was this one girl who was, whose scores were, everybody was like, this student is probably not going to be making it. The counselors had a heart-to-heart conversation with her, and she came back and she just, something went off with that conversation. She came back and she was like, you know what? I'm going to prove everybody wrong. She didn't go home an entire summer. Mm-hmm. She stayed on the island.
Right.
And all she did was studied. And then she took her step one, or NBMEs in step one. She knocked both out of the park. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of her professors were like, oh my God, it is so, they were so happy to see that, but because they were really pleased to be wrong about her. Good. And now she's knocking it out of the park in clinical.
That's awesome.
So to your point, I just think that environment really helped. But Dr. Kehedy, I had a question for you. You said that medical school pushes you to the limit.
Ooh.
Can you elaborate on that? What does that mean? Does that mean that you're just not sleeping? Does that mean you're not eating? Does that mean you're just running 500 miles a day? What does that mean?
Well, there may be a little bit of everything, lack of sleep, forgetting to eat. But the thing is that it's going to, when it pushes you, is in the sense that it will require almost all of your energy. Like you have to give it your whole.
Okay.
And you'll be hard pressed to find a single medical student in this world, in America, who will tell you that he didn't consider quitting one day. You'll be hard pressed to find a doctor who is going to tell you that he didn't consider quitting one day. And what people don't realize is that medical students are one of the highest in the statistic of suicide. And suicide is almost like being pushed to the limit because you're gone.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily and by that I mean also that it requires a lot of mental work, a lot of mental health work, a lot of intelligence, and But the thing is, you have to be dedicated to the cause.
Right, right.
You keep the goal in your mind, the light at the end of the tunnel. You're trying to keep it as small as it is. As you are advancing, it becomes bigger and bigger.
Right.
So you keep the light on and trying to focus to get there.
Right. So this is very interesting because in our last podcast, Dr. Ramirez, our provost, actually said kind of the same thing, that you have to celebrate small victories and break up your journey into small parts. Don't come in an MD1 focusing on passing step 2.
Right.
That's a disservice to yourself.
Too ahead.
Yeah. He's like, focus on passing MD1. Focus on passing the first block.
Right.
Focus on the first test. That's all. Take one step at a time, and every little victory that you get, celebrate.
Correct.
But when you mention this thing about statistics amongst doctors having the highest rate of suicide, I would like to just throw that in there, is that that is true for American students. And there have been recent studies about this, that one of the primary causes of this mental condition is the excruciating and crushing debt that they have. The average American doctor finishes residency with about $300,000+. Or not finishes residency, starts residency. During residency, we all know students don't necessarily get a pay. I mean, I shouldn't call them students, but the doctors don't really get paid a whole lot to be able to pay off a $300,000 debt. So at that point, the debt actually increases dramatically. So by the time most students are finishing residency, and at that point they probably asked for a stay or something like that, the stay only means that, they're not reporting you to credit agencies. Your loan keeps ticking as it's supposed to. By the time you finish residency, a 3-year residency, hypothetically, you've landed in $500,000+ debt. That is supposedly, that's one of the primary reasons, because a lot of physicians are thinking, and if you go into one of the university hospitals, or if you choose to stay in a big city, a lot of you're not going to be making a whole lot of money even post-residency. But it is that crushing debt that seems to drive a lot of students over the edge. However, I will like to also say that if you go to, St. James, your cost is $105,000. Again, I'm not advocating. I mean, mental health is of paramount importance. But at the same time, I do think there are significant advantages of going to the Caribbean schools, and I think that's one of the biggest ones. I mean, of course, there are super expensive Caribbean schools that are even more expensive than U.S. schools, but at least I can speak for St. James. I do think the incidence of that particular aspect is dramatically lower from the student population that we deal with. But that is not to say that mental health is not important, or that our students are not being afflicted by mental health ailments at a lower rate than anybody else. But as far as at least the suicide is concerned, I genuinely think that because of our costs being as manageable as they are, we have not seen that as an institution.
Well, that's really good.
So I'm pretty thrilled about that. But I want to ask both of you individually, and I'm going to open this up to both of you.
Fantastic.
As you were students, which is, again, less than a year ago.
Right.
What are the tools that you guys use? So let's start with number one, motivation. Are there any apps? Are there things that you did to keep you motivated? Or did you have vision boards? I mean, did you just stand on your head or do cartwheels? What helped you get through the rigors of medical school? Some tools.
Okay. Well, I'll go at it first. How do I get... Okay, so let's not talk about a year ago, because that would be near the end of my journey. Let's talk about what my motivation was from the very beginning. When I decided to go to St. James and got my acceptance letter and everything, I decided, I'm going to go take a loan out, be able to assist me. My parents, I'm sure on their own, they may be able to help, but it wouldn't be easy on them. Right. It would be a lot of burden. So I was lucky and fortunate enough to get a bank loan. So when I did, and as crazy as it sounds, everything moves so quickly between my acceptance letter and getting ready to leave home and go to a different island. I didn't have much time to think or process. But just before I was about to go, I thought to myself that I have taken out a major loan. This loan includes my family. It includes me. And I am going to a different country. And what I'm actually doing is I am betting on myself. I knew that in Canada, the only way for me to get into the position that I wanted to get into, being a doctor, which I wanted to, I would have to go through a master's program. I would have to work on my resume, basically. And then even after a master's program, I wasn't guaranteed. Basically, once I decided to go to St. James, I had no avenues in Canada. I could go into research. Right. I could go into neuroscience research. That was one of the things that were considered, but that wasn't something that I was interested in.
Wow, it sounds super exciting.
I love research in the clinical aspect, but the research that they were doing, the research that I did in undergrad was very different. It was on animals. It was on animal models.
It's more academic.
Right. So I had no other way to go. Let's just say in my life, that was my lowest point.
Right.
And I knew that if I messed that up, well, there's nothing for me to go back to. There was no way back. I would be in debt over $150,000 because that was my loan.
Right.
And I would have nothing to do. And I would probably have to take my bachelor's degree and, I don't even know what, just keep it on the wall for fun. It would have no value, unfortunately.
What, neuroscience research doesn't pay that much?
Well, I would have to get into a master's program. So,
and
a bachelor's degree on its own is almost
right. And pardon my ignorance, but in Canada, would a master's program be paid for, or was that something you would?
So they would probably give me a stipend, something on a weekly, monthly basis where it would cover my living, maybe, and cover a little bit of my food, but nothing to the point where I'm being paid. And this depends. Not all master's programs do that. Some masters, many of them you have to pay for yourself. Right. Some of them may do that. And then if I decide to go into PhD and whatnot.
I see.
But either way, that wasn't an option that I was looking for. Plus, that would take extra time out of me. And so let's just say I was at the rock bottom. I had nothing else to do. And I figured, this is it. Mm-hmm. If I fail and I mess this up, there's no turning back. Maybe after this, if I mess it up, I don't know, I'll go open up a business, start a business. I don't care. It just can't be in STEM related. That's it. And
business ain't that bad, though. I'm just saying. I'm not a doctor, but...
Well, for me, it was that was like life or death situation. Yes, so as you can see, it was very scary. Scary in the sense was, if I don't make it, then I have to resort to a career that I'm not very interested in. Right. So that was my motivation. Okay. It was literally a fire under my feet, and it was, I got to do this.
Right.
And if I don't, and if I fail, then I'm gonna lose the thing that I love and I'm passionate about, which is medicine.
And your family is kind of indirectly dependent.
And technically, my family is now dependent on it, because technically for them it was an investment when they signed on my loan with me.
Of course, yeah.
So that was my motivation. Yes, my family, but my future, my career, what I wanted to do. And I even told myself, I said, I'm doubling down on myself at this point. And if I fail, let's say my first semester on MD1, then that's it. I will, I will give up this dream of being a doctor, and I will do something else. Fortunately, I didn't fail, did well in my first semester, and truly fell in love with medicine again. Right. And the reason why I fell in love with it was because I got to learn, I got to experience, and I got to enjoy medicine to its max. And then from that point on, my motivation has been passion for learning more and more for the human body.
Okay. I'm really glad you didn't give up, because I personally think the world will be much worse off if you weren't to be a doctor. So,
Thank you.
Dr. Kehedy, what about you? What's your motivation?
My motivation was basically the reason why I got into medicine. So I know it had to do with my own life experience, growing up and witnessing the lack of medical care around me. My mom was also a doctor before passing on.
Okay. I mean, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us where exactly you grew up? I mean...
Oh, yeah. I grew up in Burkina Faso.
Got it.
Yeah. I also lived in Congo, too.
Okay. So basically, comparatively, those countries had a dearth of medical facilities. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And so that was... So my motivation was always to be able to be... so basically, that experience drove me to want to become a doctor so that I could provide some healthcare to people who were lacking them, and even being able to not just provide as a person, but also multiply myself or duplicate myself by training other people.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest goals, and to be able to not only treat but also make sure there is more people after you to keep up and make sure, and so that in the future there will be a self-sustaining amount of providers for everybody who needs them.
Right.
So that was the big motivation for me. And once I started, I had a bunch of people behind me, rooting for me and like, hey, well, helping me. And so having all those people believing in me and believing my dream and saying that you can do it. Even some of them were concerned about having to leave the United States to go to an island for over a year and then come back. But no, they want to make sure that everything was correct and legit, and I reassure them all. And so having a group of people cheering you on was also a big motivation.
Right.
And so once I started the journey, I was like, this is something I always plan on doing. This is something I always dream of doing. And when things were getting hard, I was like, I would stop and say, well, technically I have the skills to do anything else. I could maybe even if I want to become an architect, I could do something else. I don't necessarily have to do with medicine because, as I said, you'll be hard to find a medical student who hasn't considered quitting one time. But then I come back and say, well, will you really be happy? What makes you whole? Basically, that's the thing. Because as I think we were talking about it before, but is medicine a goal or is it a calling?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was a calling.
Right.
So when something is a calling, it pushes you to keep going, even when things getting tough.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what kept me going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to summarize, it seems like for both of you, the motivation essentially came for, number one, other people essentially depending on you to be successful, which essentially meant that you were at a point of no return. This was not something that you saw on TV and it's like, oh, look at that. Fauci can be a doctor, so can I. This was well thought out. You thought about this long and hard. This is not something that you got inspired from by watching Grey's Anatomy or Scrubs. I mean, you understood what you were getting into, and you focused and worked towards it. But
I want to add something too. I don't know if that works for other people. I know you mentioned like a motivation board. I don't really know how that works, but I know one of the things too was I would sit back and I would imagine the future as the way I want it to be.
That's amazing.
Like seeing myself as practicing medicine, seeing myself training other students or becoming, doing like mission trips. And I would close my eyes and see myself doing that. And when I'm low and down, almost about to like, I can't do this, and I think about it, it kind of like makes you live the future that you want to live and brings you that kind of like a motivation back.
Yeah.
I say, okay, I want to do that. I want that one because that's my dream.
Right. So
that's really inspirational.
The term is called manifesting.
Yes.
So that's called manifesting. You're closing your eyes and seeing where you want to be. Mm-hmm. What your mind does is that it creates this reality as time goes on to bring you closer to that vision. That, by definition, is manifesting. And what you're mentioning is actually a relatively established practice called vision boarding. So people always say that, somewhere very prominent where you subconsciously look at it all the time. So, for example, in the mirror in your bathroom when you get up in the morning, put up a picture. It doesn't have to be a picture. It can be, say, your name with MD at the back of it, or, you know, a white coat, or the institution that you want to be a part of.
Right.
Put up the names or the pictures or something that resonates with you. And apparently that makes a huge difference. So what you're saying is exactly that. It's a technique in manifestation. It's a technique in vision boarding, and it's amazing. Are there any other tools? So during that period, obviously you said that there were many times where you thought that you can't continue for both of you.
Right.
Was there anything in particular? Was there a particular song that would pick you up? Was there a particular thing that you wanted to do, like cooking? I wanted to cook to get my mind off it, to remotivate you. Did you guys do anything like that?
Well, you know, I didn't do anything that would remotivate me in the term. Well, the thing is that I wouldn't cook a recipe that would motivate me to study. What I, you know, but what I would do is to do activities that would de-stress me.
Okay.
You see, that alone would be enough of a motivation.
Okay.
Right. From time to time, I had my snorkeling gear. One of the things
okay.
I really loved doing on the island, I had my GoPro, and I would just go and look at, you know, for hours, snorkel and capture the very nice, different looking, exotic fishes that I would find by the reefs, by the stones and the rocks. So it was really fun. I enjoyed it, and I think that kind of helped me kind of de-stress a bit. So you know, I would say my advice, or the thing is that other things don't really motivate you. You have to find motivation in yourself and balance your life by doing things that you enjoy. And I think that's the only way that you could keep moving forward. You know, everybody has this delusion that what medical students do 24/7 is study. I think if somebody was to do that, they would probably go crazy very quickly. The best thing to do is to balance these things, and you know, when it's time to study, but when it's time to de-stress, you know, sit down, relax, you do exactly that. And I think if you can do that, if you're able to isolate yourself away from your studies when it's not time for you to be doing that, and be able to enjoy the time that you have, I think those students will succeed the most.
Okay.
I think that's what matters. You have to find a way to find time for yourself.
Okay. How about you, Dr. Kehedy?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. And for me, beside the manifestation part, sometimes I just get up and just start dancing. I'm not a dancer, but I just like moving.
I hear you.
And play some music,
Just
just start moving, loosen up. And I mean, that gets you the blood flowing. And just watch some funny videos that makes you laugh. It kind of like makes you forget the stress.
Right. Is there a particular song that you really liked that kind of got you through?
No, not really. I don't really have like a song that.
Got it.
Yeah, Drake's album "Take Care" probably got me through. Probably got me through a lot of heartbreak and through medical school.
So the other question, the other point that I wanted to bring up was the huge volume of content.
Mm-hmm.
How did you guys cope with that? Because I've heard this, and even Dr. Ramirez in the last episode actually said the exact same thing, that students don't know how to study. Because when you're an undergrad is not easy. Right. But I don't know that anybody would go out there and say that my undergraduate was so hard that I tried to kill myself at least a couple of times. I thought about quitting. You might have a couple of people. I'm not trying to take away anything from the difficulties of undergrad, but I think the vast majority of people don't necessarily feel like that through their undergrad.
Right.
But when you go to med school, mind you, you're doing so much. Like, I mean, in 16 weeks, you're going through books, page to page, cover to cover, not one, maybe 3 or 4 books that are easily close to 1,000 pages.
Right.
How do you cope with managing that kind of information flow? I mean, I'm still baffled. I don't think I could do it. But what did you guys do to cope with that? Were there certain techniques that you used Did you just like, you know what? I'm not even going to study 2 of the 3 books. I'm just going to try my luck and study 1.
Right.
How did you manage?
Oh, that's okay. So, I mean, looking back, so just like how you're saying what you're saying in terms of the content now, that's exact question that I had for my senior classmates. When I was in MD1, I would ask my senior MD4 classmates, I'm preparing for my NBME for anatomy, and there's so much information for me to learn, for me to learn, for me to comprehend and be able to answer questions on it. And you're in MD4, you probably have each of those classes to provide that much information and that many pathologies. And I don't remember asking this question, how do you memorize all those diseases and pathologies? And they laughed. And they looked at me and they said, well, there's no way of memorizing this stuff. Because memorizing means that you just read it over again, and you just memorized it. But the true beauty of medicine is to understand it, to understand the pathologies, to understand the diseases, what exactly is happening. I liked the answer then, but I thought it was a very cheap way for them to answer it because I needed some suggestions for my exam. But I'll tell you something. It seems like a lot. It seems like there's overabundance of information in medicine, especially in the beginning. But what you're actually doing over the course of the 2 years of basic sciences or 18 months that you're on the island, you're taking it step by step. And I think that is the key to anything in life. You know, you don't one day wake up and say, I'm going to ride a bike. You know, you start with training wheels. And just like that, we did anatomy, histology, embryology. These were the first couple of courses. The second semester, we did physiology. And so neuro and so forth. And each time when we did it, we had information from before which accumulated even further each time. What actually started happening is, let's say in the most ironic sense, we started off with a human skeleton and then built muscles, neurons, ligaments, organ system as we advanced through the semesters of medical school.
Okay.
And by the end of it, it didn't seem like a lot of information. It just seemed like information that now made sense. Everything made sense. Things actually correlate with each other. They stick. The pathologies make sense because the foundations have been taught and learned.
Okay.
So yes, to an outsider, someone who has not done medicine, it looks like, oh my God, there's so much that could be wrong with the body.
Right.
Absolutely. But you don't have to know everything. You don't even have to learn everything that is in there in the medical field. But there is this central component, the foundations, the understanding of the basics that you need to know. And that is something that you get taught over the 2 years of your basic sciences. And you would think that's when it stops. It doesn't. To this day, we learn. I mean, I think in medical field, the amount of knowledge just keeps shifting. It just keeps moving forward. And you learn things and you forget things and you relearn things. But the second time you do it, it's faster.
Right.
It doesn't take as long as it did the first time.
Right.
Information gets accumulated, and so you build on it. You learn something new every day. I mean, even now, once we have graduated, you would think, oh, you probably know the human body to its fullest. Absolutely not. There are things even to this day that I find out just by doing a question, reading something online, reading an article or a research paper. I'm like, oh, I didn't know about that. Fantastic. This is great for me to know. Okay. Even on things that I thought I knew well. That's the beauty of medicine. You'll never stop learning, but you shouldn't be afraid of the amount of knowledge in it.
Okay. That sounds almost intimidating. It's like, oh, everything's changing all the time, so there's no end to it.
There's a beauty to it and an art form.
Right.
It's ever changing.
Okay.
So you're ever evolving.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily behind that statement, like from a personal standpoint. If someone says, oh yeah, there's a beauty in, never reaching the end. I don't know about that.
See, you're worried. You want to get to the destination. I'm talking about the journey.
I know. That's a fair point because, a lot of new students coming in think like me.
Just like I did.
Yeah. And, when you come in, you're looking at the end goal and you're like, oh my God, to be a doctor, I need to memorize these 3 books. and it becomes daunting. It's like going up in front of a mountain, looking at the top, and you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm never going to be able to do that.
Exactly.
But something that Dr. Kehedy mentioned, you break it down into small pieces,
Right.
and you take one step at a time. And then before you know it, kind of like what you just said, you're going to reach the summit.
Right.
Anything that that helped you with the memorization and manage the volume of work that you had?
Yeah, I think because for example with medical school in most of the world it's like 7 years, so they have like a lot longer time to assimilate the information. In the United States it's 4 years. For us it's like 16 months of basic science, then 2 years. So it's very condensed, and it's daunting to see the amount of information that you are supposed to know. But the trick is to understand. As my colleague mentioned, Dr. Hannan mentioned, it's understanding and also thinking critically. So someone was saying that you will not find a single book in medicine that has every single symptoms of one illness. You may find something in one book that says 1, 2, 3 things. You go to another book, it says another 2 things. And so if you want to know everything, you have to have all those books combined to know every single detail for that disease. But if you understand the basics of it, what makes this cell go bad or die, and then why you find certain symptoms, you may be able to deduce other symptoms.
Right.
So if you see a question on the exam that asks you about illness, and they give you some symptoms that you never read in first aid or any book ever, and like, I don't recognize it. But if you process and say, okay, 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 4, and so the result will be like 6, and then you're like, oh, okay, then that makes sense. Okay. You can deduce in that sense. So I think the goal is not to put all the information out there in your brain, but is to understand and synthesize it so that when you see, you can recognize what you are facing.
Right. That's a really good suggestion. So basically what you're saying is that you should be able to gather. So the goal should never be to memorize 3 books in anatomy, if that's what it is. It's to truly understand, so that essentially when it comes on the test, you can make an educated guess,
right,
of the particular topic. That's actually a really good suggestion. I mean, I think that. But how would you know that you know enough? Like to make that educated
You will
guess?
never know. I don't know. I mean, to this day, you don't know if you know enough. And, I don't think you will ever be at that point. I think if you think you know enough, you would probably be very conceited individual, self-centered. I think that's not a quality I would want as a doctor. I think being a doctor means being able to accept that you don't know everything. But that doesn't mean that you don't have the tools to get to the right answer.
Right. Yeah. So I think you need to reach a certain level of confidence,
right?
But not overconfidence where you think I know everything,
right?
Because one thing I noticed is that sometimes those who do the worst are those who say they know everything. They know they say, I master the concept, I know the concept, I'm good, I don't need help. They actually do sometimes worse than the students who say.
Not sometimes. There's actually a syndrome called that. It's called, or the effect. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Wow.
Worst students tend to overestimate their performance, always.
Right.
So yeah. And you see that in talent show too, like American Idol or American Got Talent. The one who says I can sing better than Celine Dion is the one who is like piercing your eardrum, and the one who is like, I don't know, I don't sing, is the one when she starts singing, you're like, that's an angel, It's like, I mean, you need to reach a level where you are confident enough, because you don't want to be a doctor who is unsure of himself.
Right. Okay.
And nobody wants a doctor who is unsure of himself. Right. But you should not be like pompous.
Right. So it's almost like you need to seek out reality checks in between through your education and be like, okay, no, you're a dum-dum, or no, you really are above average. So hence, you probably need to move on to the next topic, hypothetically. How do you do that? Like, how would a student in their first year figure out a reality? Is it going and talking to somebody else? What if they seek out another person who also is relatively weak? And at that point, in tennis, there's always a saying, you should always try to play with someone who's a little better than you are to improve. And then you got to keep on moving on. Is there some sort of a quote unquote formula?
Right. Well, I think the main thing to understand is when you do your board exams, like NBME, which is your board exam, it gives you a very good estimate of where you stand, not only within an IMG, but also as compared to US graduates. So I think that's a very fantastic way to figure out, well, am I good enough in terms of not only my class, but am I good enough versus all of the medical students that have completed their MD1, who just finished their anatomy class? Do I have enough information and knowledge that I can go toe to toe with someone else? And I think that right there is a great check. Your exams, every time you have them, they're a fantastic check of, do I know what I learned well enough that I could be tested on it and I could critically break down a question and get to the right answer? If you can, you'll do well. You'll do well on your exams. Now, someone might say, well, not all students are great exam takers. Fine, that makes sense. But at the end of the day, that's a test-taking strategy you have to build on, right? Okay. So those are that's a fantastic way for you to gear whether or not you know the knowledge and information required for your level. I think board exams do that well. And I think students who are not great test takers, for them, counselors are best. Speak to someone like Dr. Shafi or myself. Come to us, speak to us on, well, I'm not a great test taker. I have my information. Well, we'll break it down very quickly if it is a knowledge problem or if it is a test taking problem. It's not that tough to discern between the two once you speak to an individual. And, if it is test taking problem, you can correct it. If it's a knowledge problem, well, you know what to do. You need to get that missing information that you don't have. So I think tests are a fantastic way to gauge where you are at.
Okay. What about you, Dr. Kehedy?
Yes, I do agree with testing yourself. And also it's good to work with other students. I know that one of the advice I received when I first started with school, even in elementary school, was always trying to work with the student who seems to be doing better than you. Compare yourself to those who are doing better than you, because it's a motivation to get better.
Right.
Like if you, as I say, show me who you hang out with and I'll show you who you are. So if you hang out with people who are doing better than you, you will tend to also want to do better.
Right.
And I've seen students saying that they were failing at school.
Right.
And they started hanging out with some students who were doing well and were willing to help them and pull them with them. And they started doing well. So, and sometimes you don't say have to be like the brightest. Sometimes you just have to be with someone where you also mesh. Because someone may be very smart, but he may not be the best study partner.
Right.
So it's good to, because you're going through the same journey, you almost have the same experience.
Right.
So being able to bounce ideas of each other, being able to basically, be vulnerable with each other, even talk about a mental issue that may not necessarily have to do with the class material can also be helpful.
Okay.
To get you to go through the all the material that you need to and the experience of medical school. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's pretty much all our time. But before we leave, I'm going to start with you, Dr. Hannan. Real quick, if you could give us at least 2 medical school related influencers / YouTube channels, as well as 1 retail resource that you can actually go and buy and that you did buy that truly helped you along the way. Whether it could be something as simple as one of those smart tablets that you use or something that really kind of gave you an advantage.
Well, influencers that I really like is Dr. McLaughlin.
Okay.
I think he is a fantastic individual that really gets into the realms of medicine and picks on the negativity while also looking at the positive side. And I think he does it with his sense of humor, which is something that the medical field for a very long time has been this field where people say, it's not a joking matter. So I think it's a very fresh look to the field. And the other individual that I like, influencer wise, is Dr. Mike. He's a family physician doctor. He talks about, he watches videos, he watches shows, and he he breaks it down saying what's going wrong, like Grey's Anatomy, what are they doing incorrectly, and every 5 seconds they're doing something wrong. But it's very funny to see it from a doctor's perspective. Like, how did you come to the conclusion that this person has cancer without doing biopsy?
Okay.
I saw a CT scan. Okay, what? Just looking at CT, you figured out what it was? Okay, that's fantastic.
It's
So
George Clooney, man.
Right.
You can do it. Yeah.
so those are great influencers that I feel that are really amazing to the medical field. A resource that I found that was very helpful for me was at the time a Surface. The reason why I liked it was because it was a laptop and kind of like a tablet at the same time that I could write on it. It was fantastic because I used it to draw and write out my notes, especially for anatomy. I think it was really beneficial. Biochemistry, I could draw out the pathways. Anywhere where there was a intricate aspect, I love to just draw it out. Brain pathways was fantastic. So if anybody's going through the medical school in the beginning, if you can spare the funds, buy yourself a Surface. I think it's a fantastic resource. Actually, any tablet would work. The only reason why I recommended the Surface was because it was powerful enough to do my day-to-day activities while simultaneously being a fantastic tablet that I could write and draw right on. I'm sure other tablets like the Apple one, they're fantastic, but let me be honest, money is a big factor. Right. And I wasn't, unfortunately, I wasn't that liquid at the time. So I did what I could and I purchased it off of Kijiji for $400 a Surface, and it did the job.
All right. What about you, Dr. Kehedy?
Well, I don't really know any influencers, but for me, it's interesting he mentioned the Surface because I also did use the Surface.
I am an influencer. You know an influencer.
Oh, yeah, that's
He's
true.
taking that off the list. No influencers for sure. But what about websites? Two websites that you used as a resource.
Oh, two websites that I use as a resource. Honestly, Emboss was a good resource. I like the library for Emboss. Okay. Yeah. And actually, I did use this resource called USMLE. So U like YOU and then SMLE. They had like Enki flashcard. And usually I do my own Enki cards, but I was new to Enki. And the reason why this one worked for me because the way he does his Enki card is the same way I do mine. And he goes through the understanding process. So he doesn't just put like facts, like front page, this is it, what's the answer? No, he actually go to the process like arrows and explain. So that was what, as I was mentioning earlier, you need to understand the process, not just memorize facts. And I like that. The only difference that this is not free. They have tons of free Enki decks out there, but this was like, I think he increased the price now, but back then it was like $100.
Well, it's cheaper than a $400 tablet.
But I did buy one. So that was actually very helpful because that actually unclicked in me like the understanding part.
Okay.
Awesome. So USMLE, U and then SMLE.
All right. And any other resources that you might have used, whether they're technological, whether there's even like, just taking a notepad and writing things down and crossing them off? Is there anything like that?
I used a Surface to do that because I like drawing.
Yeah, you can copy from Dr.
No, I actually did. That was my first thing. But now I actually bought a new tablet writing part. This is after I graduated. Right. Remarkable. And I think if you can get one, because you can draw on it, you can write down it.
They aren't as expensive as a $400 tablet. I mean, they're cheaper.
No, it's cheaper.
Which one?
I mean, unless you get all the bells and whistles, maybe. If you get all the bells and whistles.
A Remarkable is more expensive because my $400 tablet could, play videos on YouTube and.
But the Remarkable is that you don't get distracted. It's basically like a notepad. You can read on it and you can take notes on it. So you won't get any notification on your phone saying, bloop, you have an email. Or you won't get any notification like, bleep, there's this new viral TikTok video. Come and check me, That's the thing. But like an iPad on the Surface, sometimes you may have like, hey, come and see me dance on my TikTok.
Okay. Right. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This was amazing. I mean, and we're definitely going to be putting links to all of the websites that we talked about, including Kijiji or Kijiji.
They better start sponsoring me at this point.
But anyway, I mean, I think the long story short from the last two episodes, including this one, was that, again, there's no shortcut to being an MD. It's hard work. It's a hard path to travel. Make sure you know what you're getting into. I think that's the biggest key. it's a mismatch of expectations. People watch Grey's Anatomy, they come here and they're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to look like George Clooney after I'm done. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of hard work, and the last thing on your mind is looking good.
Thank you so much for tuning into our show. We hope you enjoyed another episode of Med School Minutes. If you like our content, please follow us and receive notification when a new show is posted. This podcast is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. For a video version of this podcast, please check us out on sjsm.org/video.